Good morning, everybody. My name is Jared O'Leary. In this stream, I'm going to answer a bunch of drumming-related questions. If you're watching this after the fact, there's timestamps in the description of YouTube, so you can actually see what I was talking about, when I was talking about, different topics. But we've got a lot that we are going to cover today. My mouse just disconnected. Nice. Let's pull that up. Okay, so here's a preview of some of the questions that we're going to talk about. So, why some music educators are bad educators, how being competitive, how you can or cannot be competitive in multiple activities. We're going to talk about challenging yourself with harder content, how to work on 3 drum sweeps on the tenors, teaching younger percussionists, straight fingers and bad techniques. So, like, are your fingers going like this? Or are you going like this with your traditional, etc. We're also going to talk about inequalities in the performing arts and the marching arts and whatnot, how to improve your roles, and how to practice bass drum on your own, etc. So we got a lot of things we're going to cover today. So stay tuned for all of that fun stuff. But it looks like things disconnected on my end. Let me check. I had an issue the other day where the stream just like totally messed up on YouTube, so I want to make sure it doesn't do that. Today's probably going to be a longer stream like the last one that we did 2 days ago, which was about an hour and a half. Okay, looks like we're still good. Sweet. Okay. I've got a thing here that's going to help me keep on track. But all of the prior live streams, including the one that I just mentioned, is found in this playlist, the Drumming Live Streams playlist. And there are over 300 videos in here. A lot of it is just me showing how I'm practicing specific things and showing like the things that I'm currently not good at that I'm trying to improve over time. So you can check that out if that interests you. Wow, my mouse just keeps disconnecting. Why are you doing that? Odd. So you can check that out. And my mouse is disconnected again. We're starting off strong. Often I'll get people who'll come into these streams and they'll ask me some questions, and I will take those questions and I will refine it down into an edited answer that I will put into this drumming tips playlist right here. So this has, I think, about 10-ish hours of free advice and tips and whatnot from somebody who's been playing since 1998, who's been teaching since 2003, who's got a bachelor's, master's, PhD in music education, and won awards as an educator, as a performer, blah, 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 blah. Now, all of the resources that I mention and demonstrate in all of these streams can be found on my home tab of YouTube. You can find it, like, all the different playlists there. There's drumming, gaming, computer science stuff, because I'm a nerd. But the best way to go is actually linked at the top of the screen, /drum on my website. This is where you'll find the 55 chop exercises, the 900-plus grid variations, all the 100-plus timing exercises, 55 drum charts. My mouse disconnected again. This is going great. Over 250 marching bass stuff, almost 250 technique exercises. I've got enough to get 250, but I need to schedule them to release. Stay tuned for that. And then the playlists that I was just mentioning. Let me try and fix this mouse issue. I don't know if like the USB was loose or something. We'll find out. All right, so stay tuned. We might lose it. Let's see. I've got 2 more. Cool. The Instagram one and that one. Good. So we're going to pull those up to kind of like talk about some stuff here in a little bit. Okay. Now I've got some notes for myself because I wanted to make sure that I kept this on track just like we did 2 days ago. Okay. Now, when I'm doing these, because I took some notes, I'm going to kind of review them. So I might like pause in between each one of my thoughts, just kind of like look at the flow and whatnot. Like this first one's complicated. So let me kind of take a look at it real quick. Get that coffee energy going. Okay. So I made $45,000 as a teacher with a doctorate, but low pay isn't the only reason why some music educators are bad. So here's why. So music teachers in particular, we get a K-12 endorsement. So that means that we can teach literally any music class. It's not like it's an endorsement in teaching drumline or in marching band or in orchestra. It's an endorsement in all music. Phone alarm is going off. Now, what that means is administrators would like to hire like very qualified people, like ideally somebody with a marching band experience to teach marching band, somebody with choral experience to teach choir classes, voice lessons, etc. But they don't always have that luxury. So, for example, just to keep things simple, they might have enough classes to be able to hire a music educator who would teach 25% band, 25% orchestra, 25% choir, and 25% music technology. They don't have enough so that they can hire somebody who just teaches music technology the entire time or just band the entire time. So they're going to hire somebody to get full-time status, and that person is going to have to teach all those different classes. Sometimes it's more than that, sometimes it's less than that, and sometimes music teachers are teaching at multiple schools, like I have done in the past as well. So they want, the teachers want full-time income, usually, so they will sign up to teach something that they might have very limited experience in. So the person might have like a decade of experience in band, but they may have only taken a methods course on everything else that they're being required to teach. So a methods course is a class that teaches you how to teach a instrument or a skill at all grade levels. So for example, I had to take methods courses on low brass, high brass, woodwinds, and double reed instruments. I had to take it on high strings, low strings, on percussion, even though I was a percussionist, so it's kind of ridiculous I had to do it. I also had to take marching band, so some schools will have marching band as like a methods course. And then there's like the music technology one. There's like all these different classes that you have to take. There's also a general music one, there's a piano one, etc. So there are many classes that you have to take in order to learn how to become a music educator. To the point where you'll be taking a class like 3 days a week, and you're getting 1 credit for that. So most degrees, when you have that kind of a load, that would be significantly more than a single credit. But because there's like limits where you can only have usually like 120 credit cap for your undergrad, they will often like get away with things where you'll be taking way more classes than your peers in other majors, and you'll end up like having the exact same number of total credits at the end, like 120. So like one semester I had like double the number of classes that like my friends in the sciences had. It has to relate to that, etc. Okay, so why is this a problem? So one of the problems with the methods courses is they focus on breadth and not necessarily the depth. So they will often focus on like how to play an instrument, but not necessarily how to teach an instrument. So a lot of the people who are ending up teaching these like methods courses are like TAs for performance majors or faculty from the performance side of things. So they have experience playing on the instrument and teaching that instrument, but they don't have the experience teaching it within context. So for example, they may have never actually taught a K-12 school, but they're going to teach you how to play trombone and not necessarily how to teach trombone within like an elementary school or a high school or whatever. So this creates some issues because they just frankly don't know how to teach very well in the K-12 settings. They're only used to being able to teach it at the like collegiate level, etc. So you also have issues with not just like the methods courses that you have to take, which there's a lot of them, but you also have to take multiple music theory courses, multiple history courses, non-career related degree requirements like math, science, etc. And you combine all of this, and it makes it so that it dilutes your experience within the program when it comes to how to teach music classes. So you're focusing on all these extra things that don't necessarily make you better at being able to teach in multiple different music-related concepts. So this is why undergrads typically focus on the performance side of things, and then master's students actually learn how to teach, like you're diving more into that, and then doctoral students focus on research or on how to teach educators, which is what some programs will do. So what you end up with is you get a bunch of people who might be really amazing at performing something, or might have like a lot of experience being able to teach privately or working with like a specific subset within music, for example, like choir, but they've never focused on teaching like an entire ensemble, or they've never focused on teaching different types of classes like music technology or percussion class, etc. So this makes it so that there are very highly qualified educators who can teach a very subset of music classes, but they're being asked to teach things outside of that, and that makes it so that they end up being really bad. So if you have a music teacher who's not very good at what they do in the class that you are in, it might be because they're actually much better at something else. They might be like a jazz person who's being asked to teach choir, and they've never actually performed in choir, but they took a methods course, so they're considered highly qualified. So that creates an issue. You made it! That is awesome. Seriously, like, congratulations. I'm super happy for you. Edwards, that's awesome. Yeah, you've been talking about the auditions and whatnot for quite some time, but I'm glad I can help in some way, in any way. But the real, like, kudos is 100% to you and, like, the efforts that you did to be able to make the line. So congrats. Good job asking questions and like preparing yourself in advance for that. And like, obviously that paid off for you. So that is seriously awesome. GG's. Let me get some water. I don't know if I did a good job explaining the teacher pay thing. I guess I'll add a bow on top of that. So while teachers do certainly make very low income, like I more than doubled my salary, like leaving teaching and going into nonprofit space, the issue is not just like the low teacher pay attracting people who are less qualified. It's just that the actual degrees that you get are diluted because you're taking so many classes and so many things, and you're being asked to teach stuff outside of your expertise, which actually relates to a little story that I have that I think is interesting. So I'm actually not considered to be highly qualified in the state of Arizona. So when I was going to go from my provisional to like the standard certificate as an educator, they discovered, the Department of Education, that I did not ever take a class on phonics, like how to teach phonics and whatnot. And so they're like, sorry, you're not actually highly qualified. You have to take this class in order to be able to get the standard certificate. And at that time, I had a doctorate. I had been teaching in the elementary space for 7 years. I had won awards as an educator, as a scholar, etc. And all of that didn't matter. The fact that I had a bachelor's, master's, PhD in music education, I was still considered to be not highly qualified because I did not take a class, a 100 level class on phonics. Now, the thing that was really funny about this and why I decided ultimately not to actually like take that class is because I pulled up some of the universities and community colleges in the area and started reading off some of the classes. And one was like, would this class, would that count for this requirement that I need to be able to get the standard certificate? And so when I was going through it and I would read it off, here's a 100 course for education majors on phonics. They said, we can't actually tell you whether or not the class would count until you finished the class and submitted the transcript. And then we would tell you whether or not it counted. So they're basically asking me to take a semester-long course only to find out after I completed the course whether or not it would actually count towards that thing that I was missing for my requirements to become considered certified as highly qualified within the state of Arizona. Now, what's funny about all this is in Arizona in particular, it's actually up to the principal or to the admin at the school to determine whether or not you're considered to be highly qualified. And so the admin could hire somebody who's like going to teach a business class who's never gotten any education classes, never formal education, etc., and say, yeah, they're highly qualified because they ran successful businesses and they can hire them. That makes it so that there's like a much faster pipeline to be able to get teachers to teach in the classrooms because Arizona, there's a shortage, but it creates so many different issues where like if you're going the standard route, like you're considered not to be highly qualified with a doctorate in education with like, I have over 100 presentations. I've done over a dozen publications, all these awards as an educator, and I'm not considered highly qualified because I never took a 100 level course on phonics. And it's like, what? So the education system is broken in many, many different ways. Okay, here's another topic. Okay, so this one is on being competitive in multiple activities, which I often saw a lot of students trying to do. So if you want to be competitive in more than one activity, you're likely going to fail. So for example, I've had some students who wanted to be like really good at drumline and they wanted to be really good at like a sport, like, I don't know, lacrosse or something. So if you end up splitting your time, let's say 50-50 between drumline and lacrosse, you're competing against people who will double the amount of time that you're able to spend on one of those activities. So for example, myself as a person who marched in a drumline, I would focus all of my effort on drumline and I would get double the amount of hours if we spent the same amount of time than somebody who is splitting that between two different activities. Sometimes students will even split between multiple different activities. This can create some huge discrepancies in performance over time. So here's some example research that kind of demonstrates that. Let me zoom in. Okay, so this is from Erickson et al., and this is talking about deliberate practice and whatnot. So this chart right here is showing over time the skill level and the amount of practice on this. So we have people who are like just kind of the educators, which they're actually lower than some of the good and best students. And one of the reasons why is because they're spending their time not only learning how to perform, but they're also spending their time learning how to teach. So that takes away from the time practicing. But then there's also a huge discrepancy between like the good students than the professionals, and that has to do with the amount of time practicing. So for example, the professionals practiced over 30 hours on average a week, whereas the teachers, when they were older, were practicing only about 10 hours per week. So this shows huge discrepancies in ability levels and the age and the amount of time that's practiced over time. So if you are the kind of person who is splitting your time between like drumline and something else, you are going to end up in this category because of time. You just simply won't have enough time to be able to practice as much as the people who are the professionals, who are able to put in more effort over an extended period of time. Now, this is just one study that has been duplicated, replicated across hundreds of domains for decades. So if you think that like, oh, well, Mozart, like blah, 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 like, no, it has nothing to do with that. Mozart's dad was the best violin instructor in Vienna, and he had decades of practice, both as a performer and as a composer. And his early stuff was not very good. You can go back and look at it. Good morning, Waffle. If you don't believe me, you can check it out, etc. So this is all backed by decades and decades and decades of research that says if you want to get better at something, you have to invest more time. You have to practice in it. And it's not just like the amount of time, but it's also focusing on the right things in an effective or efficient way. So it's all about the overall practice. And if you're splitting your time between two different activities, you're just not going to get the hours in as much as somebody else who is just dedicating their time to that, which is a sobering reality for people who want to be able to be good at multiple activities and whatnot. I know that's hard to hear, but that's what's backed by research, and that's what I've seen in the decades that I've been teaching with literally thousands of students across every single grade, kindergarten through doctoral student. It all comes down to time and consistent effort. But what do I know? Okay, let's see. Next topic. Okay. So this one. One of the things that I actually recommend people doing is spending about 10 to 20% of your time pushing yourself to play something harder than you can. So for example, if you are on drumline, you can practice these like chop exercises like at the top of the screen right here. And let's say your skill level is like at a 5 right now, like out of 10. And these chop exercises might be like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 in difficulty. If you push your hands and your brain to think a little bit faster and play something more difficult than you currently can, this will make it so that you can progress over time. Excuse me. So while I recommend the majority of your time you work on your technique by like working on grid variations with rudiments or working on any of these technique exercises and whatnot, spend the bulk of your time doing this stuff, it is very beneficial to also push yourself to be able to play something that is more challenging than you currently can. So for example, when I was working on marimba, I would play stuff that I was comfortable with, but I'd also learn pieces that were more difficult than I could play typically. And that would teach me some new concepts that I need to learn and show me some of the gaps that I needed to fill with some practice to be able to get to that next level. So if all you do is sit with what you're comfortable with and not practice the things you are uncomfortable with, you won't necessarily be able to make that progress, and you might end up hitting a plateau with your own performing that that's often very difficult to get away from because you just like sit there and then you're just stuck at that level because you're not pushing yourself with that 10 to 20% of your time to be able to play faster or to play something more difficult than you can comfortably play right now. Let's see here. Okay, so this one. Let's... We're going to talk about tenor sweeps, so let's do this. I haven't drummed at all today. Let's see how this goes. Okay. Okay, so you might have some difficult tenor sweeps that you are unable to play right now, but one of the ways that you can break it down is to go with a system like I will demonstrate. So for example, if you're playing stick control, where you're playing right, 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 left, so... and you have like 3 drum sweeps on it, and you're unable to get it right now, you can start off by playing a check, where it's just one measure of playing the sticking pattern. So right, 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 left. So and then add in the first drum that you're going to add into the split. So for example, we might go, and then you go back into check on one drum. And then add in the second drum of the split. Or maybe even something like that. Then you add in the third note of the split. So you basically are alternating between vertical, all on one drum, and then adding in a note. And then vertical, all on one drum, adding in another note. Why are we going back to the home base of the vertical? It makes it so that you are focusing on that consistent technique, so you don't all of a sudden get like the tenor heights that you might see where like maybe you're playing a split pattern with like flam accents, and all of a sudden your taps are raised and your accents are lowered, and you're playing something like that as opposed to, because you're focusing so much on the split. So if you go back from vertical into a split, vertical split, and you're just adding in one note at a time, this can make it so that you can slowly get better at it. Now, one of the ways that you can practice this is to start slow and then go fast and then slow it back down again so you can refine your technique for that. Now, there's actually an exercise or a tool rather that is specifically designed for that on my website under the technique section. So you can either do fast, fast, or slow, fast, slow. For each one of these, there are different subdivisions in here where it's either the quarter note, eighth note, triplet, or 16th note. And what the exercise is going to do is it starts off at a faster speed. So let's say your starting tempo is 100 beats a minute. It'll go one click at a time slower all the way down to 40, and then it'll hold there for 4 measures, and then it'll go back up to your starting tempo. And it does that for every BPM from 60 all the way up to 240 as something that you can work on. So if you go into any of these, like let's say you're playing a triplet split, you can work on the triplet pattern by going into the timestamps and then saying, hey, I want to start at 210, go all the way down to 40, and then go back up to 210, and then it'll count you off, and you can play through this. Now, the opposite of this is slow, fast, slow. So slow, fast, slow will start off at 40 beats a minute. Let's go back to here, this one, and then go up to whatever your highest tempo is that you want it to go up to, and then it'll slow it back down to 40. And again, it does it with quarter notes, eighth notes, triplets, and 16th notes. So this is a great way that you can work on that timing exercises. You can work on rudiments. You can work on splits, and just sit there and like do vertical for a measure and then split for a measure and start with maybe 1 note, 2 notes, 3 notes, etc. So hopefully that helps with that. Pull this up. I don't think I necessarily explained that well. I'll review the stream and see, how could I have done that better? Constantly refining, always trying to get better. Okay, so this one is on like how to teach younger percussionists, because I've, like I said, I've taught every grade, kindergarten through doctoral students, so like a wide range of students. But when working with like elementary kids, like in the primary grades, so like 5-year-olds and older, like 5 to 7-ish, it's very different than the way that you might work with like a middle schooler versus the way you might work with a graduate student, etc. Like you have to take into account their not only their development, like mentally, cognitively, but also just like what their interests are, their attention span. There's like so many different factors to consider. So the way that you end up teaching a young musician might cause them to end up quitting making music. I've seen it happen many different times. So if you approach working with a young student the same way that you might approach working with a high school student or a college student, you might actually bore them or burn them out. So what I recommend doing, especially for the younger kids, is to focus on having fun making music. So let the student set the pace in terms of like how focused you want to be, rather than you setting the pace and going, hey, by week 2, we're going to be here. By week 4, we're going to be here. Like, let the student push that. So if they are very motivated and they want to be able to work through something at a faster pace, then great. You can go at that pace that they want to go at. But if they just kind of want to have fun making music and take their time, not necessarily focusing on technique, great. Just get them involved with this. There's a lot of research on skill acquisition and expertise development over an extended period of time by K. Anders Ericsson. And one of the things that they found is that early educators got students motivated and interested in wanting to learn more about what they were doing. They didn't burn them out right away by focusing on little nuances and details. They instead just made it fun to be a part of the activity. As the musicians or athletes, etc., got more into that activity, they were able to, over time, decide, hey, I want to refine things more and get more in-depth with what I'm learning. And so then the educator either changes or the educator shifts their approach and they focus more on diving deeper. And so this aligns with, like, again, decades worth of research on decades, plural, worth of research on like how to improve and develop expertise and whatnot. One of the ways that you can actually do this with younger percussionists is you can focus on songs that they enjoy. So like if you're playing on drum kit, focus on something that they want to just like learn and have fun with, and simplify it in a way that makes it so that they can have near immediate results. And maybe that's just like something like just the hands, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then maybe next time add in the bass drum, or maybe the time after that add in like changing where you're playing on the drums, etc. Like keep it simple and slowly expand over time, but again, go at the pace that they are comfortable going at. Another way that you can do this is actually turn it into a game. So for example, one of the things that you can do is put on music or put on a metronome, and then say do like a repeat after me kind of approach. So you could play, and then their turn, and then their turn, and then they'll play that. So you just like are basically trading fours, and you can call something like repeat after me, and then flip it so that the student is the one who comes up with the phrase for 4 beats, and then you're the one who repeats after them. So it will likely get pretty goofy pretty fast with the things that they're doing, and that's totally okay. Again, if you let the students set the pace and you focus on having fun rather than just like focusing on refining techniques, it's going to make it so that they are less likely to get burned out, and make it so that they're actually more interested in making music and continuing over an extended period of time. You have to approach teaching context differently. So for example, if I'm teaching somebody who is forced to be in a class versus somebody who is paying to be in a class, that is night and day different in terms of their like level of buy-in of just coming into the experience. So the way I would teach those students are 2 completely different approaches, and same thing for taking into account like their development abilities, because some students are able to focus more and some students are able to focus significantly less. That is very correlated with age. So younger students tend to have less focus and be less interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of the stuff that I might nerd out on, like with technique, and that's just normal. So expect that. But everybody's different. So some students are like more interested in technique at younger ages and vice versa. Let's see here. Let me review this real quick while I get some water. Okay, so let's talk about tension and technique. Straightening your fingers when you're playing, whether it's match grip or traditional, may be slowing down your playing or impacting your endurance. If you're playing something, you might end up tightening your middle finger, or you might be pulling off some fingers right here, etc. There's 2 things that instructors will often critique with this. One is it's very easy to kind of like spot and see when hands don't match each other. Another is that it might cause some unnecessary tension, which will impact your speed, your endurance, your hand and sound quality, not your hand quality, your sound quality, etc. So, for example, when it comes to impacting your sound, if you are holding your stick in a way that is causing your hand to absorb some of the vibration, it's going to literally choke off the sound quality, as opposed to if you relax and let the stick vibrate a little bit, you'll be able to get more sound out of it. In addition, if you are holding your stick in a way that your fingers are tight, it's going to actually prevent your hand from being able to move naturally. So for example, if I use my wrist like this and make it floppy and just nice and relaxed, as soon as I squeeze my fingers like a fulcrum, if you're using a front fulcrum like this, I'm unable to bend my wrist. It is very difficult to bend my wrist unless I'm doing it very slowly, as opposed to as soon as I relax, like this. So when it comes to playing, if you want to use like a wrist approach where you're playing with a nice relaxed wrist technique, you're not going to be able to do that with tight or straight fingers. Same thing with the left hand. When you're playing traditional grip, it can impact your sound quality, etc. Now, this can also create some unnecessary tension in your hand, which can have some profoundly negative impacts on your playing. So, for example, I was talking to a drummer over the weekend who was talking about somebody that they knew who had very tight hands, and they ended up getting all sorts of hand troubles decades into their playing experience, to the point where they could no longer practice the way that they used to. And it came from decades of bad technique that was tight technique. So when they were playing in a way that they were squeezing too much, which causes unnecessary tension. So for example, let me see if we can do this. If I have my traditional grip, if I have my thumb tight right here with my index finger, it's going to cause some tension all along here. As soon as I relax that, you can feel it go away there. If I am straightening out my middle finger or pulling these fingers off of the stick while playing traditional, so like this, it's going to create all kinds of tension down here and along this side of the arm. All this tension, again, is going to prevent that natural fluid motion with your hands when you're playing. So tension is a bad thing. So if you're straightening your fingers, or your fingers are coming off the stick in a way that is allowing the stick to vibrate so that you can get more relaxed sound, but it's not causing that unnecessary tension all up and down the forearm, etc., that is okay, generally speaking. It is a visual tick in terms of, like, it looks different from people around you if you're in drumline, but in terms of, like, your long-term ability to play, it's likely not going to cause some issues, and it's likely not going to impact the sound quality. So, tension with your hand, straightening the hand, fingers coming on or off the stick, as long as it's not causing that tension, it will not have, most likely, a negative impact on your overall playing or your overall sound quality. So focus not just on how it sounds. Actually, that's not how I should phrase it. Focus not just on how it looks, but focus on how is it impacting your sound quality and how is it impacting the tension and the motion and the mechanics in your hand, depending on the technique that you're using. I don't know if that made sense. Oh, which gets into something that I should also mention. So when you are playing, if you have pain in your drumming, like dull muscle pain, or you're starting to develop calluses, like on the cuticle, or if you play mallets, you might get one in your palm. That is normal. But if you start to feel sharp pain, that is a bad thing. So if you are experiencing sharp pain when you're playing traditional or with your match grip or whatever, one of the things that you can do to figure out what the problem is to go through and individually tighten each one of your fingers, like press them into it, over squeeze on your fulcrum, over squeeze with your technique, whatever it is, and then where you feel that sharp pain, that's where you know, oh, I need to work on that slowly and make it so that I am no longer squeezing extra hard when I am playing A, B, or C technique. And the best way to work on that, again, is to just always go back to like the technique exercises and go very slow when working on it, so that way you can improve the technique without messing up your hands for the long term. Because like, since I've been playing for over 26 years, I've seen so many drummers who had to stop because of their hands. I've been able to keep going because my technique has improved over time and because I learned how to play more relaxed, and a lot of that came from playing slow. So all these like thousands of like play-alongs, the reason why they go so slow, like as slow as 20 beats a minute, is because you can really refine your technique that way. How would I teach a beginner how to play rolls? That actually gets into something I wanted to talk about. Good question. Let me see here. So it's a little different than what Howard's gonna do it. So there's two main approaches that people use when it comes to learning how to do a roll. So a roll, usually speaking, is a double stroke roll, so 2 strokes in the hand. Now, when it comes to concert percussion, a lot of the ways that people talk about doing a roll is to just simply start with a bounce and just alternate. And you slowly go faster and faster, etc. And then you eventually get to the point where you go, okay, now try and limit it so you're only doing 2 notes at a time. And you can get away with really uneven sounding rolls on concert snare that has like a nice resonant sound, etc. But if you're playing on a drum pad like this, those rolls don't sound even. If you're playing on a snare drum for a marching snare drum, those rolls won't line up with everybody else. So the other way that people will often talk about rolls is using something like double strokes or like double beats, so that you are individually stroking each of the two notes rather than focusing on a bounce stroke. So you can start with this if you're teaching a beginner drummer, and they might get used to playing a roll and it'll sound okay, where you're just kind of bouncing it in like that. But you eventually, if you're doing drumline, want to be able to show them how to get that second note to sound better. So there are many different exercises that you can do to work on that. So let's actually talk about some of those by going down to here. Let me move this. Too far. So for example, double beat exercises that are found under the technique exercises linked at the top of the screen. One of the ones that I recommend working on is diddle strength. So this exercise is a very basic double beat. And you're putting an emphasis where there are accents. So there's only about a 3-inch difference between the accents and the taps. So the second line is actually like, and the third line. So that is an exercise that is really helpful for students to be able to feel that second note, because you're emphasizing the second note of a diddle. Now, the reason why it has it on the right hand, both hands, left hand, both hands, is because for drumline, you want to make sure that your hands are super even. You can get away with having uneven hands on drum kit, but if you're teaching a beginner student how to play a double stroke, you might want to start off with some exercises that focus on emphasizing that second note, so you don't have rolls that sound like this, but instead get rolls that are much more even. Now, there are other exercises that are great for improving rolls. Once students have the diddle strength down, you can then apply it into a context where you can actually use double strokes. So for example, there are many different triplet diddle exercises and 16th note exercises in here. When you go to this, you'll like pick one like this 2-count 16th note diddle exercise, and you just start learning how to permutate, how to shift a single diddle, multiple diddles across the different subdivisions, whether it's 16th notes or triplets. So we start off with diddle on 1, diddle on 2, 3, and then 4. Just get that first line down with beginners who are learning how to do rolls. Cool. And once they get that down, now try the second line where you're actually doing 5 strokes, and then 7 strokes, and then full roll and tap roll. Do the same thing for triplets, so that way they can get used to the different subdivision permutations on there. Once students start to get this down and they're able to start to feel like what it's like to play a diddle, what you're likely going to get as they get faster is, again, that second note is going to be lower, as opposed to having that second note louder. We overemphasized it. So there are some variations in here that are helpful for fixing that. To fix that second note issue, I recommend working on the inverted diddle exercises. So this exercise is the exact same thing as the triple or the 16th note diddle that we were just talking about. So everything rhythmically in this is the exact same thing as the 2-count variation of 16th note diddle. All you're doing is putting a single note before the diddle while keeping the same sound. So instead of going right, right, left for like a diddle, you're going right, left, left, right, left, left. So if you have a roll, you're going to start with a single note. Right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left. Instead of right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. You start with a single note. Why is this important? This actually makes it so that the second note is lining up on the subdivision as opposed to the first note. So instead of getting used to playing a roll with 1 E and 2 E and you're actually playing so that the second note of the diddle lines up with the subdivision. Like that. So this is a great way that you can work on it. And once they are able to get this down, then we need to get into interpretation of diddles. So like a slurred diddle might sound like, as opposed to, or a rush diddle might sound like, or a crush diddle is another way to phrase that. So there are diddle timing and 5-stroke roll timing exercises that are great for specifically working on that. There's many different versions of this where it's like accent on 1, accent on 2, accent on 3, and then the 16th note version as well. But for these particular exercises, you're going to play a check, play a diddle pattern that is slurred, normal interpretation, and then rushed interpretation, and then normal interpretation. So it's going back and forth, intentionally changing the amount of space in between each one of the notes. So that way you can play it rhythmically perfect and can actually hear, well, what does a slurred out 5-stroke sound like? Or what does a rushed diddle sound like? And so this exercise is great for that. Another one that is also really good to work on is the, roll timing exercises. So these are really good for improving the timing of it, because it not only does a normal roll, but it also has the inverted roll right afterwards. So you're going back and forth between normal interpretation and the next interpretation. So that is a long-winded answer of basically saying what I recommend for beginners. If you're learning how to play diddles, is you can start off by just the bounce stroke, just getting used to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Then you need to start working on double beats where you're trying to strengthen the second note of a diddle. Then you put it in context where you're playing, like in these playlists. Then you put it into context by playing triplet diddles, 16th note diddles, where you are permutating a single diddle and then 5-stroke diddles across the different subdivisions. And then you can start refining on things like diddle timing, 5-stroke timing, and your roll timing and whatnot to be able to make it so that it sounds consistently in time. So that's a long process that might take months to be able to get to, but that is a very thorough process to be able to make it so that you can actually play through all of these. Once you get these down and you can play this all at one height, I then actually recommend going into the grid variations and working on the diddle variations, whether it's 16th note or triplet, and you go into it and you are permutating accents on the diddles and off of the diddles. So there are many variations in here. So for example, there are over 70 variations for just the 16th note diddle variations that you can do, whether it's like diddle on 1 or 5-stroke on 1 or diddle on taps or a tap 5 after accents, etc. Like there's a lot of variations in here that you can explore to work on 2-height combinations of diddles and whatnot. Very long-winded answer. You can watch the VOD to see the full process that I recommend. Okay, so let's talk about this other one. And then I'm going to talk about inequalities in the performing arts. That one's going to be a longer one. That'll be a bit of a rant. We'll talk about marching bass first. If you march on bass drum, it's often difficult to find ways that you can practice and simulate what it's like to actually perform with several other people on the line. I've got over 250 exercises that are specifically designed for helping you to be able to improve. So for example, the splits timing exercises, there are many different patterns in here that can help you out with practicing without somebody else there. For example, splits timing variation 2 is a very simple exercise where you're just playing either 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E, or and then you play the 4 strokes. Now, the first 2 lines of each one of these timing exercises makes it so you can hear both parts. So you might play the top part or the bottom part. But once you get to the second part and the third part, it's actually going to mute different sections of this. So this first one is going to... No, that's not how I want to phrase it. So when you get to the third line here, it's actually going to mute drum 2. So all you hear is 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E. But when you get to the last 2 lines, it's going to mute drum 1. Now, why is this important? It makes it so that you can actually practice playing with the computer. So you might play 1E computer, 2E and 3E and 4E and on the computer. And then it makes it so that it flips it so that all you hear is your part, so you can hear whether or not you're playing perfectly in time. So the splits timing exercises are great ways to be able to work on your marching bass stuff without actually having to practice with somebody else, because you are filling in the patterns for different kinds of subdivisions, different kinds of splits, etc. Some of these are pretty simple and some of these are very complicated. Now, there's even more marching bass exercises that can help you out. Like, for example, if you have a bass line with 5 people and you click on this bass permutations, there are over 30 videos that are many different variations, permutations of some splits with 8th notes, triplets, 16th notes, 6-tuplets, etc. that you can work on different permutations on here. So I highly recommend taking a look at those. But we also have a ton of timing exercises and timing transitions. So you can also practice just your basics of like triplet timing, eighth note timing, 16th note timing. There are over 80 timing exercises on here that are currently members first, but that are scheduled to release over time that can help you work on your timing, different subdivisions and whatnot. But then there's also the timing transitions. So this is going from one or more rhythms into other rhythms. So for example, you might want to be able to work on your 5-lits into 9-lits. Well, you can work on that by going into these timing transitions, and it will have all sorts of different variations that you can do to practice that. Again, these are currently members first, which means that they're scheduled to release to work on that. So even though it is difficult to practice marching bass drum on your own, you can practice this by using these exercises on here. And then there's literally thousands more that you can do with that to work on your technique, chops, etc. You have something challenging? Can you play a triple stroke into a floppy flam? I mean, you can. It won't sound good. If you're playing, it depends on how fast the triple stroke is. But usually speaking, when people play a any kind of a diddle, whether it's 2, 3s, or 4s, into a grace note pattern, you will remove the grace note for that particular note. So for example, the other day when I was working on the chug variations on here, where is it? Yeah, this one. Okay, so this is flam accents into single doubles. So you'll notice after a diddle or after the single, there's no grace note here. Same thing if you're doing like flams and rolls, like the variation for that. Let me pull that up as well. So chug with flam accents and rolls. This one has the tag, so it's longer. But after every one of the rolls, it's just an accent. No flam on the accents right after that. So you could play like a triplet stroke into an accent and then go into floppy flams. Something like that. But normally speaking, you wouldn't do it because it's super hard to clean as a line. Like the exercise Fulcrum Freddy, there's a transcription that's been floating around for a very long time that is inaccurate because it has the grace note after the diddles and the singles. So people have like hypothesized like how to play it like on Reddit and stuff, like, but it's all wrong because it's just a bad transcription. There's in the actual sheet music, it's just a single accent. So yeah, you could do that. Like if you're doing an I&E solo or something and you want to go from like a triplet stroke or a 4-stroke or a diddle into floppy flams, you could totally do that. But as a drumline, it'd be so hard to clean. In my opinion, it's just worth it to remove the grace note and just play basically an accent, if that makes sense. Okay. Let me review this really quick. This one's a complicated one. And I think I still have this. Yes. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna actually use that in our diagram here. Okay. So this one I might need to pause because this one's complicated. People might not want to hear this one. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about that like I've written down are inequalities in the performing arts. So this is something that is not discussed enough, in my opinion. So many years ago, I read a dissertation that changed my perspective on competition in the marching arts. So the dissertation was exploring something called like non-performance related predictors that correlated with scores for, I totally phrased that wrong. So it focused on non-performance related correlates that were able to predict scores in the marching arts. So one of the big ones is proximity to the competition space. So groups that are competing at the national level or the international level that need to pay to be able to travel from wherever their home site is to that competition site are going to end up paying more than people who might live right next to it. So as an example, where this creates an issue is groups like, let's say for easy numbers, if you have 100 members in an ensemble, like a marching band, and each one of them are paying $1,000 to fly somewhere, to pay for their luggage and their instrument fees, to be able to get the instrument over there, you're going to pay $100,000 for a single trip. This is something that is fairly normal, especially if you are a large ensemble, you're going to pay even more than that just to be able to travel to a competition space or a performance space. So this can create huge discrepancies in terms of the amount of money that can go towards other things in the program. So for example, if a program ends up paying $100,000 just to travel, and they're competing up against a program that lives right next to the performance space, that group is not going to need to spend $100,000 on traveling. Instead, they can focus on paying for more staff members. They can focus on paying for better instruments, better equipment, etc. So this actually has a huge impact on some of the inequalities that you'll find in the marching arts. So for example, I'm not explaining this one well. So this week, BOA Grand Nationals is coming up, and this chart right here perfectly demonstrates some of the inequalities related to just travel and the ensembles and how they're able to do. So this chart shows all of the groups that are going to be represented here, 113 groups. And you'll notice this huge cluster right here in Indiana. Why? Well, since 2008, BOA Grand Nationals has been held at Lucas Oil Stadium, which is right here. So the groups that are in this area are going to spend significantly less money on travel than groups that are much further away. So for example, if a group is in Hawaii or California or Texas, they're going to end up paying a bunch more money towards travel fees with like plane tickets and travel to get the instruments moved across the country all the way over to here compared to groups that live within driving distance of the performance site. So instead of spending money on that travel time, these groups that are near Lucas Oil Stadium are able to pay for a better student to staff ratio. They're able to put more money towards higher quality staff who have more experience. They're able to pay for a better design team who are able to design a better show. They can afford better equipment and props. And this is just one of the predictors that can have an impact on like how students are going to perform or how ensembles are going to score in competitions like BOA or DCI or WGI, etc. So some of the other things that might come up is like the student's ability to afford private lessons. So some schools offer private lessons and group lessons as an elective. So I wish I had that when I was going to school in high school. That would have been amazing. But instead, I had to pay out of pocket to be able to study with many different people, which ended up working great. But some of my friends were not able to afford those lessons. They also were not able to afford the time to practice. So for example, I didn't need a job in high school, and I was able to, instead of spending that time each week working at a job, I was able to focus on practicing. And I could also practice in a way that didn't annoy neighbors or family. So if you're living in a space where you have neighbors below you, above you, right next to you, you might not be able to work on percussion stuff or even like low brass stuff, etc., compared to somebody who is living in a space where they don't have anyone that is annoyed in the immediate vicinity while practicing. Some of the students that I was working with, they could not go home and practice because they lived in apartments. So I would have the band room open before school and after school and even during lunchtime so students could just come in and practice because they did not have that ability to do so at home. That is another form of inequality that shows up in terms of being able to practice. But I also had some friends who were unable to practice because they had to work jobs to be able to like help pay for bills with their family. So even though they wanted to be really good at drumming, they were unable to because they were having to spend so much time, money, effort, etc. on things that were not drumming related. There's also the cost to participate. So like fees to be able to perform in these ensembles. Some people can't afford that. And then there's also the loss of income while rehearsing or practicing instead of working at a job. So if you're doing like DCI, you might be gone for 2 or 3 months where you're not able to like teach privately or to work at a job where you normally be making money. So not only are you paying to participate in that ensemble, you're losing money by participating because you're unable to work or because you have to practice so you're unable to work. So some groups will even start learning their music and their drill in the spring, while other groups will wait until late summer or early fall to start learning that kind of stuff. That creates another set of discrepancies between the ensembles that are performing in there. So some groups will even have marching band that starts before high school. So some will start marching band in middle school, maybe even late elementary school, where they will start learning the basics. They'll start getting used to just moving and playing by playing in parades, or even having their own like middle school competitions. While other high schools will not start their marching like program until the freshman year, or sometimes even the sophomore year, because some schools, high schools, only go for 3 years instead of for 4 years. So they're just sophomore, junior, and seniors. So these are just some of the non-performance related correlates that end up predicting some of the scores that you will see. Because again, if you're able to spend more time, more money on the things, then you're able to outperform people who are able to spend less time on this. So programs with less money and less support are at a disadvantage when they are competing against programs with more money and more support. So as an example of this, just look at this chart right here. So it's not to say that there are no good programs in California. There are certainly some phenomenal programs in California, but the cost to compete is so weighed against them compared to groups that are right next to where BOA Grand Nationals has been for decades and is continuing to be. So it's going to go on. Currently, it's scheduled to continue to have BOA Grand Nationals up until 2028. And probably sometime after that as well. So that'll be 2 decades where it has been in the same location. That gives an advantage to everyone who lives around there compared to some of the different events or competitions where things are moving around to different areas. So like there's conferences that I've presented at that likes to shift from West Coast to like kind of the center left to the center right to the East Coast. And so it makes it so that it's cheaper some years and more expensive other years, as opposed to just being in the same spot every single time. Then that would make it so that if it's like in New York or something, then people in California will always pay more than people who are living like on the East Coast, etc. So those are just some of the inequalities that are related to the arts, and I just genuinely wish that we talked about this more. It's not just about like how good you are as an ensemble. It's not just about how good the instructors are. It's also like the amount of money, the amount of time that can be invested into these different programs. So if you have a school that has $100,000 that they're paying on travel versus a school that can invest that $100,000 into paying better educators, which one do you think is going to perform better in the long run? Probably the one that's able to afford higher quality staff, or to be able to afford free private lessons for their students, or to be able to start earlier, sometimes years earlier than the other programs. It's just like a night and day difference. So if we look at like the research on expertise and skill acquisition, the whole like 10,000 hour rule, like who's able to put in the 10,000 hours faster? The people who are able to spend more time on it, or the people spending less on it? Pretty easy math there. Anyways, that was a lot. My voice is sore. Talking too much. Okay. Those were the things that I wanted to talk about for today. I've did a bunch more different questions that I talked about on Saturday. So if you go to the live streams here, and you take a look at the previous one, I've got timestamps in here that shows all the different topics that we talked about. So if you go into the description, it's got all these different questions that I was asked in chat, or some of the questions that I prepared in advance. So you can check out some more of those. Again, I'm going to go back and edit these 2 streams and then turn them into tips that I will eventually put into... We only need 1 of me, not 2. I'm going to put them into the drumming tips playlist. You can find all the stuff on my YouTube channel. On the home tab, we've got literally thousands of free exercises and drumming tips. If you just go to here and click on the header for it, then it makes it so you only see the drumming playlist as opposed to also the gaming and the computer science stuff. But I put all of the tips edited down into a more refined answer into the drumming tips playlist here. And there's like 10 hours of free tips from questions that people have asked. So you can check that out there. If you like any of these thousands of free play-alongs or any of the drumming tips, just share it with somebody else. That does help me out, because as more people find the content, then it makes it so that people will use it more, and then I eventually will stop making just pennies a day. It might eventually make dollars and tens of dollars a day for this free content. Any of the videos that say members first, just remember it is scheduled to release publicly for free. I think there's around 250 that are currently scheduled, So there's a lot of them that say members first, but I promise there's a new play along releasing daily. So stay tuned for more. I'm going to call it here. I'm going to get ready for 9 Souls, and we're going to be playing that here probably in about 20 or 30 minutes. But I do appreciate everybody stopping by, and I appreciate people sharing this content. But before I start 9 Souls, I'll go in and add in the timestamps in the description so you can actually see all the different topics that I talked about in today's stream. But I'm out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, goodbye.